Today we're going to cover feasibility. So we've got quite a good amount of people wanted to watch this, and for good reason, because property development is all about getting the numbers right, isn't it? So just before we start, it'll take about 20 seconds. For those of you who don't know us, Hilary Saxton and myself, we own Property Mastermind. We educate property developers on how to do successful property development. So we've got an online course and workshop, and we also have one-on-one mentoring. If you want to find out any more, jump on the website. Okay, let's get into it. So what we're talking about is a bit of a mouthful. Financial feasibility analysis. Wow, that's a fair mouthful. But typically, well, we'll call it a feasibility. And in fact, around the office, we just call it a FISO. So if I use the word FISO, forgive me, but it's just what we call it. So I suppose if you want to use a bit more slang, we're talking about crunching the numbers, and that's what it's about. With property development, it's all about the numbers, getting the numbers right. And it sounds a lot easier than it is. In fact, over the years when I've seen, and remember I've been doing this for over 40 years now, property development, but over the years I have come across a few people who've gotten into trouble with their property developments, and I always like to try and work out why and how it happened. And in many cases, they got the numbers wrong. They just really didn't know how to do the numbers. And they made a pretty poor sort of a project look a lot better than it was. And you don't always know at the beginning. Sometimes you don't know until you're actually into a project a bit that you bought yourself a lemon, and that's not what you want to do. So as they say, the numbers never lie. Well, if you do the accurate numbers, the right numbers, they won't be lying. But be that as it may. So we're talking about numbers. So look, don't be spooked about doing the numbers. I know some people aren't all that good at maths, and they start to worry, oh, geez, I'm no good at numbers. I hate numbers. I failed maths. It's okay, because in property development, it's very simple. You're either going to do addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division. It's that simple. And these days, of course, and we'll have a look later, we've got some good programs that help us, software programs that help us do our feasibilities as well. So in the old days when I started, it was all manual. There was no laptops, there was no software. I just did it with a calculator basically, and then typed myself up on an IBM golf ball typewriter, a profit and loss statement, which really is all a feasibility is. It's really just a profit and loss statement. In fact, in its simplest form, and this is the same with any business. It doesn't matter whether you've got a fruit and veggie shop or you've got a manufacturing business. It comes down to this: your income less your costs of production, whatever it is, equals your profit. Now that's oversimplifying things, but really that's what it comes down to, and that's all a feasibility is. Now we're going to break that down a bit more, because we can't just work on a 3-line feasibility, but that's really what it comes down to. Income less costs equals profit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you, if you haven't already been introduced, to a few terms that we use in property development that we often use in feasibilities, and also when we're talking about finance. And that is GRV, TDC, and profit. Profit's pretty simple. But GRV, what we're talking about there is what we call gross realisation value. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. But what it really is, in regards to a project, it's what you sell the project for. So if you were doing something as simple as a duplex, it's what you're going to sell those 2 duplex units for. It's what they're worth, what you're going to sell them for. So gross realisation, it's how much money you're going to realise by selling the product, that makes up your project, GRV. TDC, total development cost. So that is all the costs that make up your project. Every single little cost that you have to spend on your project all adds up to give you the total development cost, TDC. And profit, well, I don't really need to describe profit. It's what's left over, isn't it? Profit, it's what we're aiming for. We're trying to make the best profit we can, the most dollars we can out of a project. So if we're talking about a very simple little formula, and don't get spooked by the word formula, It's pretty simple. GRV minus TDC equals profit. And that makes sense, doesn't it, if you think about it? So what you sell your units or your blocks of land or your apartments, what you sell them for, minus what it cost you to develop that, your costs of production, if you like, equals your profit. Now, you don't want to be in a situation where your GRV is a lower number than your TDC, because that would then equal the loss. And certainly don't want to do that. Although I have seen a few projects over the years that people have started and not really finished where that was the case. And that's not where you want to be. So GRV minus TDC equals profit. This is a feasibility in its absolute simplest form, and we'll expand on that as we go. So let's just put some numbers behind it. That might make a bit more sense. So let's just say, look, this could be anything. This could be, let's say, a 3 townhouse project where the townhouses are worth $800,000 each. It could be a duplex where the duplex units, 2 units, are worth 1.2 each. It could even be a subdivision, I suppose, if you want to. You know, it could be 3 $800,000 lots. It doesn't really matter what it is. It's more about the numbers. So if the GRV was 2.4 and our total development costs are 2 million, what's our profit? Well, it's pretty obvious. We've got to take it away. So our profit is $400,000. So that's just putting a little bit of context around it. So when we're talking about our GRV, our gross realisation value, that's our sale price, isn't it? It's a sale. So we're just finishing off a duplex at the moment, and that was in front of the first one we sold. So Hillary looking pretty pleased with herself there, big smile on her face, so she should. That particular duplex unit, it's what we call an upmarket duplex. It's in a very good situation, not far from the beach, very good standard of finish. And that one sold, that's a cut and paste off the contract. Sold for $2.5 million. That was one unit, one side of the duplex. The other side on the market at 2.5. So the GRV on that, assuming we got to get 2.5 for the second one, is 5 million. So that's your sale price. It's where it's what you get for them. Now, as far as your costs go, well, there's all sorts of costs when you think about it. There's, marketing. We've got to pay commission and advertising. We've got, big one, the cost of the land at the beginning, and we've got legals and stamp duty on that. We've got council fees, and that varies from council to council as you go around the country. You can't avoid that. There's always something in there. Consultants' fees, architects, engineers, whatever we're using, surveyors, they're in there. That GST, oh, damn it, you can't get away from that. That's the one you can't escape from. You got the ATO on your back if you're trying to escape that. Construction, well, that's another biggie. If we're building something, and we're always building something, even if it's a block of land, we're building something in there. We're connecting services and finance. Well, hard to get away from that too. So that's just an indication of some of the major costs that we'll come across when we're doing a development project. So let's have a look at profitability. Now, this is important. Goes without saying that we want to make a profit out of our project. We're not going to do one if we're going to make a loss. And you can look at some projects. Sometimes you look at a project and you do your feasibility and you might even make a loss. I've seen projects where you can make a loss by buying the land and doing the project, you actually make a loss. I've seen plenty of projects where if you do your feasibility, you just don't make enough profit. You'll make a profit, but not enough. And of course, you do some feasibilities and it's good. You make enough profit, and they're the ones you want to do. So profitability, what are we talking about? How do we judge profitability? How do we work it out? How do we decide if something's profitable enough to do? And that comes back to this. And it's what we call typically return on cost. So we call that the ROC. So you might hear me say, what's the ROC on the FISO? Well, it's what's the return on cost on the financial feasibility analysis, but I don't walk around saying that all the time. Now, Some other terms which mean exactly the same is margin on cost. You might hear some people talk about that. It's the same thing. It's an MOC. And some people might even call it the developer's margin. So it's all the same thing. But what is it? What is it and how do we calculate it? Well, I'm just going to call it return on cost, the ROC, because that's, typically around our office what we call it. And what it is, it's the profit as a percentage of your cost. It's the profit expressed as a percentage of your total development cost. That's what it is. That's your return on cost. So if you were to make a very simple formula, that's what it looks like. It couldn't be much easier than that. I mean, you don't have to be a maths whiz to do that. There's no sines, cosines, and tangents. There's no algebra involved in this. Pretty simple. I did say that. So if you've got your profit and you divide that by your total development costs and multiply by 100, that'll give you your ROC, your return on cost. So let's apply that to those numbers we had a look at before. Remember those numbers we looked at? Let's have a look at that. Okay, profit 400,000, total development cost 2 million. Let's remember that. Let's go take the next step. So here's our little formula. Profit divided by your total development cost times 100. What's that look like? So your profit of 400,000 divided by your total development cost of 2 million multiplied by 100 equals what? Well, it equals 20%. So our ROC, our return on cost, our margin on cost, our developer's margin is 20% in this example. Well, is that profitable enough? Is that profitable enough to do? Should we do it? And the answer is, well, yeah, pretty much in most cases, that'd be a nice little project to do, that 20%. Now, I will explain something to you. There's two people who are really interested in what this margin is, this ROC. One of them is you, the developer, because you want to make sure that this project is profitable enough to do. But the other person who's really interested in this is your financier. So I'm assuming you're going to use a financier and that you don't have a bank full of cash somewhere and it jammed in the backyard, that you're going to borrow some money, that you're going to go to a financier. Because it has to be profitable enough for them, not just you. So I've seen some people do a feasibility and it makes X dollars profit. And they say, oh, look, I know it's not 20% or 18% or whatever it is. It's a low percent. And I say, but I don't care. I'm going to do it anyway because it's still, $150,000 or whatever it is. I'm going to do it just to get the experience, just to make that 150 grand. But the problem is that might be okay for you. But if the financier doesn't think so, you're not going to get the money. So it really doesn't matter. You've got to make two people happy. You've got to make yourself happy, and you particularly got to make your financier happy. And that's one of the benchmarks that they look at is it profitable enough? And that all comes out of the feasibility. So it's not always the same for every project. So I'll give you an example. If you're looking at quite a small project, not lots of dollars involved, we're talking about a small subdivision here. It could be 2 lots, 3 lots, maybe even 4, just a small subdivision. And what I've got here, 10 to 12% ROC. Is what's that? What, that's not 20. Is that okay? Yeah, well, look, a small subby, look, it's quick. It's quick to do. There's not a lot of dollars involved in it. And so financiers are okay accepting a lower margin on that. And 10 to 12% is okay. Duplex, well, a bit more complicated. We're not just talking about a 2 or 3 lot subdivision, you're actually building a building now. And so you'd be expected to get a better margin on that because there's more dollars involved. It's going to take a bit longer. And so typically, we'd be looking around the 15% mark ROC on that. And let's take it up a step. Let's talk about some townhouses now. Well, once again, a bit more. So finance would be looking for, that 18 to 20% mark. So that's the return on cost. Don't confuse it with ROI, which is return on investment. Totally different animal at all. I mean, the financier really doesn't give two hoots about the ROI. The ROI, return on investment, really, if you worked it out, would be, it would be the profit you make compared to the amount of money that you put into the project. So I'm not covering that as part of the feasibility because it's really not part of it. But some people can get a little bit confused sometimes between ROCs, ROIs, IRRs, internal rate of return. I don't want to make it too complex. But typically what you might in a property development called an ROI, it's the return on investment. It's the amount of money you make, which is your profit, compared to the amount of capital that you actually had to put in, which we call equity. And that could be either a flat rate or you could annualise it so you could compare it to money in the bank. But we're talking about the ROC today because that's what's relevant to feasibilities. So as you can see, it does vary with the type and size, complexity of the project. Okay, so when it comes to doing a proper feasibility, there's really 4 components to it. I've got here the item. So you need to know the item, the relevant amount, the dollar amount. And these days, of course, GST, I mean, GST is a significant number. Is that applicable to this particular item? And the timing. So I'll just explain that briefly. So the item, and we'll have a look at different items in a moment. It's whatever item. Now, on the income side, there's not many items. It's basically, you know, on a duplex, selling unit 1 and selling unit 2. That's the items, the sales. Or you could have the sales of the 2. That's the item. But when it comes to the cost side of it, there's lots of cost items. And we'll have a look at some of those in a moment. So there's really only one revenue item, one income item, if you like, your sales, but there's lots and lots of cost items. And this is where people go wrong. This is where I've seen newbies who haven't gotten themselves educated at all. They just headed out there and flown by the seat of their pants or tried to learn something on the internet or think AI is going to get them over the line. Sadly, it won't get you there. And so what tends to happen is they don't understand the cost items. It's generally not too big a leap to get to understand what these things might sell for, but the cost items are a bit different. So people tend to either leave items out because they don't know what they don't know, and that'll make the project look better than it is. If you start leaving cost items out, you're going to make the project look better than it is. Or also the amounts, if they get the amounts too low, or combination of both. This is what I see with people that, you know, haven't gotten themselves educated properly, is they'll leave items out and they might have low amounts on some. And that's going to make a lemon look a lot better than it is. And so, plenty of people have bought sites by doing bad feasibilities for that very reason. They leave cost items out or they don't know the amounts and they're low. So very important to understand those two things. GST, look, most of the items when you're doing a property development have a GST component, but not all of them. The ones that don't are typically council fees, state government fees like stamp duty, land tax, those sorts of things. So not all items have GST, and so it's good to know which ones don't. And of course, the timing. Timing's important. How long is this project going to take? How long is it going to take me to get a development permit, get a building permit, get a builder lined up, get the thing built, get it sold? How long is it going to take? Because if you get your timing wrong, it'll make a difference. So the thing that affects the timing is the interest. So you're paying interest every day, okay? So the longer it takes to do a project, the more interest you pay, the higher your costs because of that, and it diminishes your profit. So timing is important. If you've got a project that realistically takes, say, 22 months, and you get all carried away and put it in at 16 months, well, you're going to make it look a lot better than it is because your interest component's going to be low compared to the real time. So timing is important. So they're the 4 things that you need to understand to properly do a project. So here's a bit of an example here. This is some of the major costs. So there's a site. The site's for sale. There it is there. The land value. That's a big item when it comes to costs. And it's not just what the land's worth. You've got stamp duty when you buy it. You've got some legal expenses and so forth. But it's a biggie, land. Here's another big one, construction. What's it cost What's the construction price on a 2-lot subby where you've got to do some service connections and maybe some driveways, maybe, different things? What's it cost? What's the duplex cost? What's it cost to build? So construction, that's another big one. This could be an architect. I don't see many architects these days with paper plans and pencils, but anyway, it doesn't matter. So you've got different consultants. You have something as simple as a duplex. You've got architect and surveyor and town planner, a couple of different engineers. So you've got these different consultants. So that's all relevant. You don't want to miss them out. Council fees. I've got the Brisbane City Council. It wouldn't really matter where you're doing it. All councils have got their hands out when it comes to doing property development. And there's a range of different fees, application fees, contributions. They can be a fair whack. So the councils there, that's another cost you got to have in there. Finance is a big one. I'm assuming you're using finance. The good news is, of course, with finance is the financier gives you most of the money. They'll give you 70 or maybe even up to 80% of all the costs that you need, the finance to cover those. So they give you the lion's share of the money that you need, but they also charge interest. And so that's pretty relevant. As I said before, that's related to getting your timing right as well. So that's another significant cost. Marketing, that's a duplex, nice duplex there. So marketing, agents, commission, advertising, maybe even if you're going to sell it when you're completed, staging it. There's different costs that are involved in marketing. And the good old GST. That could be 10% of a lot of your costs. It probably on a project probably averages out at about 8% of your total costs, roughly about 8% GST. There's some costs that aren't, like I said, council state costs, but it's a relevant figure, all right. And then you've got all the little bits and pieces in there, not stuff that's not a big dollar value, but they all add up. Things like, rates, potentially land tax, legal fees on settling, just a range of small costs, miscellaneous costs, we'll call them there. And so, they're all quite relevant to what we're doing. So I guess if we were to write them down, we'd come up something like this. So this is a pretty simple feasibility. Less simple than the one we started off with the 3-liner. And this is what I typically call my 5-minute feasibility. So, myself and other people that we've taught, people in the mentoring program who've become very proficient at doing feasibilities, do a first draft of one, if you like, and it comes off this 5-minute feasibility. I can probably knock one of these out in about 3 or 4 minutes, because I generally know all the numbers that relate to where I'm looking and so forth, but I call it the 5-minute feaso. Now, what this is here, we've got top one, that's our income, our GRV. What's that? Our GRV. And then everything else is costs. So there's a few biggies in there. We've got land, construction, different. So the land, that'd include, it'd include stamp duty. It would include legal fees and the like, whatever it costs us there to get hold of the land. Construction, that would be, the big number there would be what it costs us to build it, the building contract. But there'd be other costs thrown in there as well. Maybe the demolition, we might have to demolish a house. That could cost us $20,000, $30,000. That's significant. And some other connection fees, some inspection fees. There's different things that make up that construction figure. And then we've got the consultants. Well, who are they? Well, on something like a 2-lot subdivision, you don't have many consultants. You'd probably have a surveyor, potentially a town planner, civil engineer, and maybe a electrical engineer, and that'd be it. Maybe 3, maybe 4 consultants. When you start building things like a duplex, let's say, well, you've got more consultants. So typically we'd have, without even naming all of them, an architect, a town planner, a surveyor, landscaped architect. There'd be a couple of engineers in there. We'd have a civil engineer, a structural engineer, different. So there's different people in there. Quantity surveyor will be involved in there somewhere. So these are the different consultants that we use on that particular project. So depending on the size and complexity of the project as to who they might be and how many there are. Council fees. Yep, well, you never get away from the council. They have fees. Finance, particularly interest, that's the big cost, but we'll probably have an application fee to get the finance as well. There could be a broker involved in there as well, brokerage fees. So there's a couple of things that make up the finance, although the big one would be the interest. Marketing, once again, agents commission would be the big one in there, but there'd be some marketing, some advertising costs, perhaps, you know, some digital brochures, different things that make up marketing, staging perhaps. GST, or that'll just be what it is. It's a pretty simple calculation. And the miscellaneous costs, like I said, all those little bits and pieces that weren't big enough to have their own title, they go in there. And of course, so when you've got your GRV, less all those costs, you take it away, and that'll give you your profit. So that's pretty typical. Now, I'll just give you a rough idea where you're going to get these from. So how are you going to get these answers? Well, GRV, your sale prices, this is where you're going to look in the market and see what else is selling. If you're doing want to do a duplex in a particular suburb, what are other duplexes selling for? You need to talk to agents that are selling them. That you can go on RP data, national property data. You can just Google them. I mean, there's lots of ways. You just got to get a good handle on what this duplex is likely to sell for. Land, well, look, at the moment, that'll be the asking price of the land, part of your feasibility. Construction, well, you need to know what things cost. So who's the expert there? Well, technically builders. So you need to have started to talk to builders who are building duplexes in this area where you're looking at building one. They're not hard to find because you can see something under construction. They'll have their sign on the front, which they have to. It's a matter of making contact with them, getting to understand that. Quantity surveyors as well. That cost estimation is part of what they do. And so you need to start to understand construction costs. Consultants, same thing. You can get fee proposals off consultants. You know, you can ask, architects, the different engineers, town planners, you can ask them what do they charge, to be involved in this duplex or whatever it is that you're going to do. Same thing with councils. You can ask councils, you can go to the council, you can ring up their town planning department, you can find out what the different council costs are. Finance, once again, probably good to talk to a commercial finance broker about this, not a retail one, a commercial one. They can help you, they can tell you sort of interest rates you're likely to get on this sort of thing, what the application fees are likely to be, what their brokerage fees are likely to be. Not too hard. Marketing, you're probably aware of what real estate agents charge, but there'll be a little bit of an advertising in there, there'll be agents commission, a little bit of point of sale material. I mean, real estate agents would be a good one to talk to about that. GST is pretty simple. Once you understand what GST is, that's pretty simple to work out. And all the little bits and pieces at the end, like I said, rates, land tax, legals on sales, there's lots of little bits and pieces that add up in there. And that'll help you then put some numbers behind it to help work out what your profit is likely to be. So quick little bonus I'll just tell you about. So we'll be sending you out an email this afternoon. And on that email, I'm going to give you the 5-minute FISO for a 3 townhouse project. So I'll load the numbers in for you into that 5-minute FISO, so you can get a bit of a feel of a 3 townhouse project that we've looked at quite recently that stacks up and what those numbers really are. So there's a couple of things I'd like to tell you about FISOs. And if you're doing a feasibility, let's say you're doing a feasibility and it doesn't stack up. And what I mean by not stacking up is your return on cost is too low. Now, there's lots of reasons why that might be, but I can tell you that in nearly every case, if your feasibility doesn't stack up, it's going to come from one or some of these 3 things. At the top, I've got the GRV. So you got to get your GRV right for your feasibility. Now, if it doesn't stack up, are you too low? Are you being too conservative on your GRV? Be real. Don't be conservative, but be real. Make sure you got that right. So if you're comfortable that you got your GRV right, your sale prices, your biggest problem is likely to be in these other two areas. What the land price is, in other words, what somebody wants for the land, or the construction price. That's where the problem's going to be. And look, a lot of times it's the land. Now, if you've been out there looking at property development sites like we do all the time, because we also develop, we don't just teach, quite often people want too much for the land. They can't help it. They're greedy. And, you know, if you've ever sold real estate, you probably wanted to be a little bit greedy yourself and get as much as you can. I understand that. But, you know, a lot of the times when it doesn't add up, they just want too much for the land. They're mums and dads. They don't really understand. They just want too much for it. Or it might be worth too much as a house. It could be that as a house, it's worth more than as a development site. That can happen. And so, you know, somebody who just wants a house is going to buy it. So, yep, in that, or the construction price. So you've got to get that right. And so I can tell you, if it doesn't stack up, it's going to be in those three areas. It's not going to be because you've got the wrong amount for an architect. I don't care whether your architect's 20,000 or 40,000. It's not going to make much difference to the overall thing. I don't care if you've left out even one or two consultants. It's not going to make a big difference. The things that make the biggest difference are the biggest numbers. And in a lot of projects, if you add up just two costs, the land and the construction, they're often at least 80% of all your costs. Every other cost you can think of only makes up 20%. So that's why they're significant. And the biggest number of all is the GRV. It could easily be 2.5 times your construction cost or whatever. It'll make the biggest difference of all. So have a look at this. So that is a pie graph, obviously, and it's come out of a feasibility calculator. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. So what this is, that pie graph is a breakup of all the significant costs in a project. Have a look at that. Construction was 48% on this particular project, and the land component was 32%. You probably can't read those numbers, so I'll read them out. So that big orangey sort of part of the pie graph, that's the construction part. And that other big one, that blue part up the top right, that's the land. So construction 48, land 32, that's 80%. 80% of all the costs is those two. And they're the ones that matter. Just quickly, marketing added up to 4%, finance was 7%. So that's the ones that really matter. That's where you need to concentrate. So what are you going to do? Well, you can do manual feasibilities, or you can use software programs. But before we get into that, here's a couple of don'ts. And these are really important because I see people make this mistake all the time. When you're doing a feasibility, do not get emotional. Now, I know you might have been out there looking and you're getting frustrated and you're sick of looking at stuff that doesn't stack up and you're starting to get impatient. So don't get impatient. Well, I could have added that one in there, but the result of it is you can get a bit emotional, and you might be tempted to make a deal look good that doesn't really look good. I've seen people do it. I've seen people say, "Oh, look, I'm going to make this duplex look so fantastic. I'm going to get extra money for it. I know they're selling for about 1.6, but I reckon I'll get 1.7 or 1.75. I'm going to make them look great." And that, you know, they put up the GRV. Next thing they say, well, look, I'm going to get 5 builders to quote. I'm going to belt all of them with a big stick, and I'm going to get a really tight build price. And I know that the build price is 1.4, but I reckon I can get it down to about 1.32 or something. And before you know it, oh, look at that, it stacks up. Yeah, don't do that. Just be real. And that's what I mean by don't be a bear or a bull. So you're thinking about the share market, a bear market, a bull market. Don't be too conservative. You'll kill a good deal if you get carried away and be too conservative. But don't be too much of a bull and push things and squeeze your costs down and blow up your GRV. So just be real. Don't lie to yourself. Remember, You're doing this for yourself. Don't lie to yourself. Just do it right. And don't get too carried away about escalating future numbers. So don't start saying, well, I know they're selling for about 1.4, but I reckon in 2 years' time, I reckon the market's going to take off. And I reckon these will be like 1.6, not 1.4. So I'm going to stick 1.6 in there. The problem is that when you go for finance, the valuer checks all the numbers, and they use today's numbers. They don't use 2 years' times numbers. So, you're only fooling yourself. So that's really important. So look, when it comes down to doing feasibilities, and when I started out, I used to do them manually. I had no choice back in those days, back in the early 80s. But these days, there's lots of stuff out there. You've got Estate Master, which is owned by Argus, used to be RP Data. That's a pretty powerful sort of feasibility program, but it costs about $2,500 a year just to have it, and that's a fair chunk of money. But it's a good thing. Another one, there's a dev fee study out there. That's not too bad. I think it's about, I don't know, last time I looked, it was $800 or $900. It's not too bad. I find it a bit clunky, to be honest. I've used it, but anyway, it's okay. An alternative is we have our own Property Mastermind feasibility calculator, and that's pretty good. It's built on an Excel platform, very easy to use, and does all sorts of stuff as well. It does pages. It spits out reports, which are great for talking to valuers or financiers about. Has 4 pages of inputs, sort of all pre-built, so you don't forget stuff. You put it in, comes out with a summary page. So once you hit the green button, after you've loaded everything in, hit the green button, comes out as a summary. What's that one? I think that was a pretty fancy duplex we did. That's showing 666,000 profit. You might not be able to read it. 19% ROC. Oh, that's all pretty good. Good ROC, good profit, 667. Pretty upmarket, duplex. So that's a summary page that comes out of that. That's really good. There's input pages. They go for about 4 pages. It comes out with those pie graphs. That's where I grabbed one of those pie graphs before. One has to do with the costs. The other is like a profit and loss. It's got all these sorts of fancy stuff in it. Gantt charts. It shows you during what months certain things happen, so you can plan out your project. It's got cash flow. It's got all sorts of stuff in there anyway. That's the Property Mastermind feasibility calculator. Anyway, that's part of our course. So there is some software. There's a few other software programs I've noticed out there, or that are on their way. So go out there, have a look, do your own due diligence, see what you think. They'll certainly make life easier than just scratching around trying to do one manually, or build your own, because all you got to do is mess up a formula or two and the whole thing's useless. So unless you're an absolute whiz on Excel. So look, there it is. That's how feasibilities work. That's the basics of feasibilities. Like I said, if you want to know more about property development, if you want to get into it, give us a call. You can jump on the Property Mastermind website. As I said, we've got an online course and workshop. That feasibility calculator is all part of that. And we do one-on-one mentoring. So you want to know more, jump on there. But look, that's the basics of feasibilities. You've just got to get them right and spend some time. As I said, get to know all the items, get to know the dollar values, how long things take, and whether they have GST or not. Once you got that, it's just a matter of inputting everything into whatever calculator you want to use. But you've got to get there. Look, there's a bit of work doing that. But the thing is, like I always say, once you've got the knowledge, you've got it forever. So that's really important. This is where people go wrong. So it's very important that you get it right. You don't want to get it wrong. You don't want to find out 9 months down the track when you go for your construction finance, you've got it all wrong. And so very important, very important. So hope you learned a bit out of that.
Hey, Bob, just jumping in now. Everybody, we are sending out an email after this, and it will have that little 5-minute PISO template that he had. So that can be quite useful for people. So do open your email. And for those, some who may want to watch this again, there will be a recording included with that. So I'll look forward to maybe hearing from some of you. But other than that, I hope you got something out of that. Thanks, Bob.
Okay, well, thanks everybody. I'll catch you at the next lunchtime seminar, webinar, call it what you like. But if you're into property development, this is what you need to be. And otherwise, we'll hear you on the phone. Okay, bye now.
See everybody.
Bye.